the fire rises.
Gandalf and Obi Wan Kenobi have a lot in common. Like, a lot in common. They're both staples of nerd culture, they're both massive characters in franchises that span over 6 movies, both characters are teachers and mentors to main character heroes, they're both wizards or space wizards, and both of them at one point or another sacrifice themselves for the safety of their students, and then end up coming back from the dead. But who is the top wise sage between these two guys? Now you might be saying to yourself, hey, why do we have to compare the two? You know, both of them are good in their own way, and there's no rule saying that you can't like both of them. And yes, that's true, in the real world, but this isn't the real world. This is a flame war! And in a flame war, there is no room for reasonableness or balance, or even common sense. The only thing that matters in a flame war is nitpicking. So let's pit these two geek icons against each other and see who comes out on top. In his younger years, Obi-Wan was a force to be reckoned with, mostly due to his lightsaber skills, defeating Darth Maul, General Grievous, and even Anakin himself, not to mention hundreds of completely useless battle droids. Without his lightsaber, he was still quite formidable, but clearly he needs his saber to do some real damage. And not surprisingly, as a Jedi and his lightsaber are as inseparable as a samurai and his katana was. But the older Obi-Wan, though, was not that great at combat, and nor should he have been, as a Jedi is not just supposed to be a warrior, but also a teacher. But we're going to cover that in a separate category. Old Ben might have been able to send limbs flying in cantinas, but against another skilled lightsaber wielder, he really struggled to hold his own. But Gandalf, on the other hand, is a totally different story. Well into his twilight years, he can lock blades with the best of them in close quarter combat against multiple enemies, as well as mounted combat. I guess there's no room to grow soft in Middle-earth, no matter how old you are. Around every corner there's some monster ready to bite your face off. Unless you live in the Shire. For some reason the monsters of Middle-earth don't bother going there very often. Even though all of those hobbits will be like an all-you-can-eat buffet for them. But the point is, when it comes to good old-fashioned sword and shield battle, Gandalf easily takes the point. Could you imagine poor old Ben taking on a legion of goblins? Yeah, I don't think he would last very long. Point, Gandalf. Obviously, both characters can do much more than just swing a sword or a saber around, but what exactly are their various abilities, as seen in the films? Well, Obi-Wan, of course, has the classic 3 tropes of a Jedi, moving stuff around with the Force, Jedi mind tricks, and being able to sense disturbances in the Force. Obi-Wan also has a few other abilities in the original movie that often go unnoticed. He's able to create and project sounds, whether it's creating a frightening roar to scare away the sand people, or whether it's projecting a noise to the other side of the room to distract some stormtrooper guards. When you think about it, it's actually a really useful ability that could help out in many different situations, particularly for when you're sneaking around. It's strange then that he doesn't ever use it in any of the prequels, especially considering how much sneaking around he does in those movies. He also has the ability to read someone's mind. In A New Hope, he puts his hand over Luke's forehead when he's lying there unconscious to learn who he is and why he's there, so that when he wakes up, Ben already knows. Again, that's a very useful ability that he doesn't seem to use in the prequels. It would have been pretty handy in a situation like, say, this.
Who aren't you? Tell us. Tell us now!
Why are you bothering to ask? Just read her mind. But we can just put that on the long list of all the other stuff that we wanted to see in the prequels. Now, Gandalf has a surprisingly similar skill set to Obi-Wan. He can move things around with magic, or the Force. He can sense evil, like sensing disturbances in the Force. And he's able to do kind of mind tricks on animals, getting them to do things for him. But not on people so much. However, he is able to do sort of like a reverse mind trick in freeing someone who's under someone else's control, which probably takes a lot more skill than just doing a straight up mind trick yourself. And he can turn his staff into like a torch, which might not seem impressive, but he doesn't need to worry about his torch going out, and he could even use it to scare away a swooping fell beast. But ultimately, Gandalf's most showy display of power is him going toe-to-toe with the Balrog. By the way, have you ever wondered how Gandalf was able to stand his ground against the Balrog when it looks like this thing could just crush him right there on the spot? Well, it turns out that even though Gandalf looks like a man, he isn't. He's actually a race called the Magi. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the Magi, unlike most other races in Middle-earth, are not characterized by any physical attributes because they can change their appearance to look like almost anything. They're a race that exists primarily as magical beings, and most of them never even take on physical forms at all. So no one really knows exactly how many Mai's there are, but there are a few of them that have taken on physical bodies. And Gandalf is one of them. And guess what? So is the Balrog. Yes, Balrog and Gandalf are actually of the same race. So when we look at the Balrog, what we're actually seeing is a glimpse of the kind of power that Gandalf has. And it makes Obi-Wan look like a noodle-armed choir boy in comparison.
You think you know bad, huh? You're a f***ing choir boy compared to me! A choir boy!
A few other notable Mai's that we know of are Saruman and even Sauron himself. Now, generally the longer a Mai lives, the more powerful they become, and Sauron is very, very old, which is why he's the strongest. But this also means that if Gandalf lives for long enough, he will eventually reach Sauron's level of power, but hopefully as a good guy. So really then Gandalf has within him the means to not only surpass Obi-Wan in power, but given enough time, he would become like the entire Jedi Council all combined and multiplied by 1,000,000. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that Gandalf can take the point on this one. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, both characters die and then come back from the dead, in some form. But which form is better? Let's see.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
If you choose to face Vader, you will do it alone. I cannot interfere. Oh, I thought you said you were going to come back even more powerful than before, but you can't do anything? In fact, it seems like the only thing that Ben can really do is teach Luke, and even that's irrelevant because Yoda takes over the teaching role. But I guess Ben does tell him where to find Yoda, even though Yoda already said that he'd been watching Luke for almost his entire life.
This one, a long time have I watched. All his life as he looked away to the future, to the horizon.
So then Yoda could have easily found Luke himself after Ben died. So I guess the only reason Ben really came back from the dead was so that he could be Yoda's personal errand boy delivering messages.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, sure you will, Ben. Sure you will. By comparison, when Gandalf comes back, he is in an even more powerful form as Gandalf the White, having earned the chance to be more white by slaying the evil Balrog who is black. Huh.
That's racist!
But let's take a look at some of the stuff that Gandalf does after he comes back.
You're soldiers of Gondor. No matter what comes through that gate, you will stand your ground. Prepare for battle.
All of this while Ben was sitting around. Now, there is quite a bit of debate as to whether or not Gandalf technically died in order to become Gandalf the White, or whether he just changed forms as he leveled up. But if we assume that he didn't, then it still doesn't change much, because no matter how impressive it might be for Obi-Wan to return as a glowing blue ghost after being killed, that's nowhere near as good as not getting killed in the first place. So Gandalf, once again, takes the point. Now, I'm giving Obi-Wan a really hard time here, and in many respects it's a little unfair because, as I mentioned in the intro, Both characters play a role of mentor and teacher to other main character heroes of their respecting franchises. So arguably then, their individual strength and skills are not as important as how well they perform as teachers and mentors to their students, as it's their students that ultimately face the main evil. So how good they are as teachers is much more important than their personal combat skills. And I am happy to say that Ben Kenobi is an excellent teacher, way better than Gandalf. Why? Well, just take a look at the results of their students. Both Luke and Frodo feel the pull of evil. You got the dark side of the Force over here, and you've got the addictive nature of the Ring of Power over there. But in the end, Luke takes a stand against the dark side, while Frodo caves in completely.
The ring is mine.
And it's really just a lucky coincidence that Gollum happened to take it over the edge with him when he fell. So really, Ben was a much better teacher. When you see Gandalf talking to Frodo at the beginning of the trilogy, there is a lot that he doesn't tell him. Like that having the Ring of Power is going to basically destroy his life forever. It's pretty deceptive to not give him a heads up about that. And yes, it's true that Ben was kind of deceptive about who Luke's father was, but that's only because he wasn't yet ready to learn it. So there were still good intentions behind Ben's deception there. But with Gandalf, there's kind of this evil, manipulative undercurrent to all of his actions. He knows it's going to wreck Frodo's life, but he just lets him go on believing that everything's going to be just fine, even though for Frodo, it's definitely not going to be fine. Just because, hey, someone's got to take the Ring of Power to Mordor, right? Even Saruman calls him out on this kind of behavior.
Gandalf does not hesitate to sacrifice those closest to him, those he professes to love. Tell me, what words of comfort did you give the halfling before you sent him to his doom? The path that you have set him on can only lead to death.
I mean, you can argue that the ends justify the means here, and I would actually agree with you. I mean, if Gandalf has to ruin a few people's lives in order to stop Sauron from coming back, then so be it. But the point is, when it comes to who you would rather have as a teacher, I think most of us would rather have old Ben Kenobi. Gandalf has like a lot of balls that he's juggling in the air, and you're just one of them. But Ben was solely devoted to Luke's training and his welfare. And no doubt that's a big part as to why things worked out so much better for Luke than for Frodo. But on the other hand, Obi-Wan also trained Anakin, and he didn't do a very good job of that because he became Darth Vader. But then Darth Vader eventually became good, so does that mean that Obi-Wan did a good job of training him? I don't know, and in the end, I don't really care, because even if we say that it was good and we give him a point for Luke and an extra point for Anakin, Gandalf still takes the win anyway. Plus, we haven't even counted the fact that Obi-Wan's leadership during the Clone Wars ended in a defeat, while Gandalf's leadership during the war against Sauron ended in a victory. So yeah, for me it's a no-brainer. Gandalf wins, hands down. So do you think I got this one right? Well, if you do or not, let me know in the comments. Let me know anything I got wrong, anything I left out, any alternative viewpoints you guys would have. I'm sure you will, because that's what a flame war is all about, and that's what we all love. So until next time, I will see you later.